Grownups, if you're looking for a fun way to sneak learning into your kids' summer, check out the podcast Mysteries About True Histories. In every episode, Max and Molly travel through time and space to keep the troublesome trolls from causing chaos. From ancient Greece to the International Space Station, Max and Molly have a blast while solving riddles and even some fun, yes, fun, math problems. Want to join in on the adventures? Follow and listen to Mysteries About True Histories on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey Tailblazers! Have you always wanted to see the behind the scenes of making a podcast? Well, here's your big chance. I am inviting you to join us in making our new podcast, Ghost Tour. If you're into kinda scary but very funny stories and you are 9 years old or older, this is the podcast for you. Join the Ghost Tour Kids Club, and you will hear the episodes before anyone else by joining us for live virtual readings read by the actors. And hey, I'll be there too. You can tell us what you think of the episodes, and you might even hear your feedback in a Ghost Tour episode once it airs. And that's not all. I am going to send you the official Ghost Tour starter pack in the mail, so you're ready to go. It's going to have a vintage book of ghost stories, a Ghost Tour notebook, a Ghost Tour pencil, a mini Ouija board, and more. Grownups, you can sign up for this by August 28th at cordeliastudios.com/ghost tour or head on over to the Girl Tales shop on girltalespodcast.com. To get into the ghostly vibes, let's listen to some spooky favorites from the Girl Tales catalog over the next few weeks. This is Mitzy the Mummy. Enjoy! I would like to tell you about a friend of mine. She's had a lot of names as she's been around for a long time. But right now, she likes to call herself Mitzy. Mitzy the Mummy, to be exact. Oh, and by mummy, I don't mean mommy, I mean mummy. An actual, real-life mummy who happens to be named Mitzy. Mitzy comes from ancient Egypt, but regularly visits the Freshwater Museum of History as part of a touring ancient Egyptian exhibit that travels the country. Whenever she and the rest of the mummies, statues, and other ancient Egyptian artifacts are in town, everyone in Freshwater flocks to the museum. They just cannot wait to see Mitzy. You see, Mitzy isn't just a regular mummy. Mitzy is a rainbow mummy. Let me tell you the story of how she got her beautiful rainbow wraps. It had been a long time since I had visited any of Freshwater's museums, so I had decided on one particular autumn Saturday to have a museum day. In the morning, I visited the Freshwater Museum of Art, where I picked up a beautiful multicolored sweatshirt, since it was a little chilly. The sweatshirt was beautiful. It had almost every color of the rainbow and the swirling design across the front. Then, in the afternoon, I walked through the Freshwater Science Museum, where I bought a new gold and silver sparkly hat and a beautiful purple polka dot umbrella, since it was getting a little rainy outside. By the time it was later afternoon, I knew I had just about an hour to get over to visit the only museum in Freshwater I had never been to before, the Freshwater Museum of History. I had heard such great things about it, so even though it was getting towards the end of the day, I rushed over there, wearing my new sweatshirt, hat, and umbrella. As I walked up the front steps of the museum, I saw big signs and banners all around. I stopped by one and read, "For the first time ever, please welcome our new exhibit about ancient Egypt." The museum was strangely quiet, probably because it was close to closing time, but I figured I had enough time to take a quick tour around and then leave. I strolled casually back towards the exhibit, marveling at how much space I had to myself to look at all the artifacts. Maybe I'll even see a mummy, I thought to myself. That's when the lights got dark. The only thing lighting my way were small night lights every few feet along the walls. And then I watched the big entrance doors to the museum close and lock behind me. In the dim light, I checked my watch, and sure enough, I had wandered into the museum just before closing time, and the museum had closed with me inside it. I should pause and say that nowadays this sort of thing doesn't happen. The museum docents at the Freshwater Museum of History now know to check every exhibit before closing for the evening. But nevertheless, there I was, locked inside the museum. It felt a little spooky. I could be locked in there all night, but I knew I had to make the best of it. After all, how often does someone get to go to a museum and learn about everything they can without having to move around other people? So I continued towards the ancient Egyptian exhibit. It was amazing. I didn't know much about ancient Egypt, but the exhibit was massive and very educational. I learned all about King Tutankhamun, who became pharaoh at only 9 years old, and how they discovered his tomb in 1922. I learned about Bastet, the Egyptian goddess who had a cat head. I thought how much Bastet would love it here, with all of the local cats I had come to meet. In the center of the room, there was a sarcophagus, open so if you peered inside, you could see a real mummy, wrapped in layers of linen. It was incredible. But after all of that walking, my feet were growing tired. So I took a seat on a long wooden bench to rest. That's when the mummy in the sarcophagus sat up. Excuse me, who are you? After getting over the initial shock that I was talking with a mummy, I replied, "I'm Rebecca. Who are you?" The mummy stood up and introduced herself as Mitzy. Well, she said a lot of other names first, but now she goes by Mitzy. Then we shook hands. Mitzy gasped. I love your bandages, she said, gesturing to my rainbow sweater, gold and silver hat, and purple polka dot umbrella. They're so colorful. I wish mine were beautiful like yours. I looked at Mitzy's mummy wraps. Each layer looked delicately placed, lovingly wrapped, and beautifully adorned. But when I looked at Mitzy, she seemed unimpressed. Maybe a little bit sad. I asked her about her wraps. Well, this is how all mummies from my time are wrapped. It's tradition, but can I be honest? Mitzy asked, gesturing for me to lean in. I leaned a little closer, and Mitzy said under her breath, It may be tradition to look this way, but it doesn't feel like me. I sometimes wish I looked a little more colorful, you know? More like you. I looked down at my clothes and realized I was dressed in pretty much every color I could think of. And I realized there was a pretty simple way to help Mitzy out in that moment. Oh, I said, well, here, take my sweatshirt. I took off my new sweatshirt and hat and handed it to Mitzy, who put them on delicately. Then I handed her my umbrella. I brought Mitzy over to the bathroom so she could look at herself in the mirror. She gasped and twirled with delight. Now that is what I'm talking about. All right. Looking good, girl. The rest of the night in the museum was a great deal of fun. Mitzy showed me around the rest of the Ancient Egypt exhibit and told me a lot of stories about life in ancient Egypt. We talked for hours, but soon it was almost time for the museum to reopen and for me to go home. Mitzy gave me a big hug, then took off my sweatshirt and hat and handed it back to me along with the umbrella.
"Thank you for letting me wear those,"
she said.
"I haven't felt that much like myself in a long time. I didn't think feeling that way was possible."
Of course it is, I said. You always deserve to feel like the true, authentic you. Mitzy explained that sometimes she didn't know how to express herself, that she was afraid of what the other mummies might say or think. She even confessed that sometimes she felt a little bit, alone. There weren't many other mummies she had met who wanted to wear colorful linens. Then she walked slowly back to her sarcophagus, climbed back in, waved, and said a goodbye. I knew what I had to do. I spent that whole day out in Freshwater, shopping. Every store I went to, I asked if the store owners had a little bit of linen they could spare for my new friend Mitzy the mummy, who wanted to wear the rainbow. Sure enough, at the coffee shop, I picked up a swatch with pink polka dots. At the bookstore, they had a yard of mint green and half a yard of royal blue linen. Down at the mechanic, they had checkered linen, and over at the diner, there was bright red linen. Everyone was happy to lend me a hand. Well, lend me some linen. That night, I snuck back into the museum. I found Mitzy, who was shocked to see the many different swatches of linen trailing behind me.
"Mitzy,"
I said,
"look,
these may not all be the right fit, but I found lots of." Before I could even finish my sentence, Mitzy dove into the fabric with glee, sorting out different pieces to try on.
"Oh my word, look at all these fabrics. My goodness, they're beautiful." "Oh, wow."
Her laughter echoed around the empty room. Before I knew it, mixed among her white linen wraps were strips of pinks, golds, yellows, mints, navies, polka dots, and stripes. I explained to Mitzy that these linens were from people all around Freshwater, people who were happy to lend a little bit of fabric so that she could feel her best. Mitzy continued to try on different fabric options, asking me where each one was from and laughing with delight.
"Where's this one from? Oh my goodness, how kind. What's a diner? Interesting."
Sometimes having a community around you who supports you can really help you shine. Word about the rainbow mummy spread quickly among Freshwater. Some people even recognized the fabric they had given to me and were so happy to see Mitzy wearing them with pride. Some Freshwater residents would even come to the museum and leave some new colors of linen by the sarcophagus when they left, only to come back the next day to see Mitzy wearing them. When it came time for the ancient Egyptian exhibit to leave the Freshwater Museum of History and travel to the next city, it felt like everyone in Freshwater visited the museum to say goodbye to Mitzy, the rainbow mummy. In her short time in Freshwater, she had made quite the impression. Some kids in Freshwater even dressed up like Mitzy, wearing as many colors as they could. I was sad to say goodbye, but she reassured me that she'd be back to Freshwater before I knew it. And who knows, maybe the next time she came back, she'd be even more colorful. Mitzy was right. She continues to travel the world with her ancient Egyptian exhibit, picking up new fabrics and patterns in each city she visits. Every time she returns to Freshwater, she tells me stories about all the people she's met along her travels. She even met another mummy like her, who wanted to wear more colors, and she shared some of her fabrics with him. In fact, he joined her touring exhibit, and they toured together as the Rainbow Mummies. They've actually just arrived back at the museum, so I should probably end this story and go visit them. I just can't wait to hear more stories about their adventures. That was Mitzy the Mummy by Megan Bagala. Produced by Chad Chenail. Executive produced and performed by me, Rebecca Cunningham.